Alright, we're doing round two. This is it's the same day. It's about 45 minutes later from the last video that you watched, if you watched it. So if, I guess it would be, if you have not watched the previous episode, I would recommend watching that before you watch this one. Okay. So this video is essentially going to be the beginning of, pretty much the beginning of how everything has just gone downhill since Hawaii. Just in general summary. It's the beginning of how everything has evolved to where I am today since returning from Hawaii. Everything is connected, and my choices for why I ended up making decisions that I did, say if we're looking at at a timeline between returning from Hawaii to today, when you're looking at about a third of the way through, why I was making certain choices as I was. So I'm going to try to explain everything the best to my ability in a chronological order. You need to understand that there might be times where it seems like I'm getting sidetracked or I'm deviating and just going off in a random direction. I'm going to be talking about a wide variety of topics through this whole thing. This video is entirely intended for mature audiences, obviously. There's going to be talking about, I'm going to be talking about DMT and magic mushrooms, so drugs, I guess, marijuana. We're going to be talking about somebody getting murdered. There's some very serious stuff that, if you're watching this and you have children, or say you're a teenager and you're watching this, or you're a young adult, just understand everything I'm going to be sharing is all real life stuff, and depending on your maturity and things that you're aware of or not aware of, if you're not aware of things that I end up bringing up, you need to understand that it could mess with your head, and I'm aware of this, and I'm going to do everything in my power to explain, when we get to these serious topics, I'm going to do everything in my power to explain it the best I can, so that you're not left in a state of confusion, or you're not psychologically numb, or whatever, you're not depressed or any of this, because by the end of the story, I'm hoping that there's, it's like a light at the end of the tunnel. So if you just if you think about a book, or any kind of book or any kind of movie that you watch, if you just think about the timeline of how a story is told, usually you start on, just imagine like a graph, like a chart. It kind of starts off like this, and you work your way up. You have these exciting moments, and then it gets a little slows down, and you're working your way up towards the climax of a story, and then you go down, and then you keep going up. It just depends how long the story is. So with my story, it's gonna be going like this. There's gonna be a lot of, sometimes we're gonna be going way up here and way down here and stuff. So just understand that's what I'm sharing. It's gonna affect you in different ways, and I'm just trying to get you as mentally prepared as possible, and at the same time, just remember that every 20 minutes the video will cut, because of the camera I'm using. It's part of the feature. It's a photography camera, but it does video mode, and it does pretty good with video, but it only does 20 minutes. And my Nikon P1000, I think it only does 7 minutes, but it keeps going perpetually, but the battery doesn't last as long. So I can either use the camera I'm using now, or my P1000, or I could use my cell phone camera. As you can see, I don't know if you can see, it's cracked. I just bought this phone a month before I left in the van, because my other phone was cracked. And I just broke this one. It's not too bad, because it's not in the center of the screen, it's at the top. But it fell out of my pocket as I was climbing out of my van. I was just getting it out of my van, and it slid out of my pocket and just broke. I just have only had it for 2 months, which sucks, but it is what it is. But yeah, so just I've tried to establish my goals, so you just know once we get going, everything that I share, there is some type of relevance either towards the story or it's information that can help you in some way, at least make you aware of different things. Okay. And I'm just gonna try to do my best at remembering as much as I can, because remember, this is all impromptu. This is all impromptu. I haven't thought about what I'm gonna talk about. I don't have it planned. I just have the general idea. Start at the beginning and just speak. So this is all just coming out of my mouth as I am recalling it. There's no script. So let's get going. Actually, I'm just gonna cut it right now, and then we're gonna reset the clock. So I have a full 20 minutes before it cuts. So no worries. Just pause that. All right. Let me get my countdown clock at 20 minutes. Reset. There we go. All right. So when I flew back from Hawaii after about 7 months of being there, when I'm telling this, I'm assuming you've watched episode 3, 4, and 5, so you know what happened. Okay. So I died. My last month I was there, I died on that couch, full on, could not breathe and lost consciousness, and anything you can imagine as far as having a death experience. That was a full-on death experience in southwest corner of the Big Island, in the middle of nowhere, with complete strangers. Only at the party for half an hour by the time I was unconscious. Only met the people that I had already known. Those are the only people I had spoken to before the event happened. Other than that, I missed the entire night, have no idea what happened. No idea. I was on the couch unconscious, or dead, and then come back to life, and then breathing again, and then wake up, whatever happened. I have no idea what happened in that room, who came in and out, anything that may or may not have been done to me. No clue. They could lie to my face. They might have been just telling the truth. I have no clue. I just died, and then woke up the next day like it never happened. I woke up that following morning, right at sunrise, and I felt like $1 million. I felt incredible. It's what the fuck? Completely mind blown. What the hell just happened? Okay. So, I've already described all that. I'm just repeating that specific thing. Somebody tried fucking murdering me at that point in time. And at that point in time, then you had the incident with the drone and Ava that I mentioned. At the time, that's where my trust in people really just got severed. Or I just at that point, I just had no idea who I could trust anymore. Especially after meeting Grant, and he told me everything. I learned all that stuff. Episode 4, all that stuff that he shared with me. So my whole perception of what is and what isn't, what this world is and what I thought it was, just completely shattered. And then having people try to murder me at the same, a few months later. Oh my God. So that was a pretty big experience when I came back from Hawaii. Okay, had all of that, and I was alone pretty much the entire time. Hardly ever talked to my parents the entire time I was on the Big Island. I never talked to my dad. He's never cared. You go all the way back from when I quit Costco, and then went on that big cross-country road trip for 6 months, and then I moved to Jackson, Wyoming, and lived in Jackson, Wyoming for 9 months, and then eventually moved to Hawaii for 7 months. The whole time I was doing all of this, he would never talk to me at all, ever, really. He never acted like he cared, never wanted to hear about any of my stories or any of the experiences I had, just act like he just didn't care, like he didn't even exist. So this has been going on for a long time. So understand what I'm saying, what I just said. This has been going on a long time, even since before I quit Costco. There's issues with him, with my father. He's got fucking issues, and I will talk about it at some point. If he's listening to this, too bad for you. Fuck you, dude. You know, I'm talking to my dad if he ends up watching this. That's how bad it is, understand. um, but, like, you know, all the photography I did in Wyoming, all the experiences I had on the Big Island, he never cared. He never even cared enough to, like, look at my photography whenever I returned back to Oregon. You know, wherever I'd gone, I always came back with a whole bunch of cool pictures and videos and stuff that I always showed my mom. My mom always wanted to see it and hear about some of my stories, but my dad just never acted like he cared, and it always was really weird, and I never understood why. At some point I will get to this, you know, so don't worry about it. It's a cliffhanger. But when I came back from Hawaii, this is when I got the whatever this relationship between my father and I was before Hawaii. When I came back, it was like even worse. Okay, so I came back from Hawaii with all of these traumatic experiences on top of all the things that I'd learned about our world. This fly is circling my head and it's annoying. Yep, I'm bald, just so you know. I'm trying to hit this fly. Kind of annoying when a fly is just doing this and all you can hear is you know. So when I came back from Hawaii, at the time, from my perspective, I didn't really have any suspicion about my dad. I didn't necessarily have any beef with him. It was just, I'm just trying to live my life, and then every time I come home, he's just weird. Just fucking weird. Act like he just doesn't care or whatever. So I was like, every time we talk, it's like he's always wanting, what are you going to do next? When are you going to get a job and just like stop traveling around, stop doing it. You need to like stop doing this, and like what are you doing next? Never listening to what I'm trying to accomplish, you know. Like when I quit Costco, I wanted to travel the world, and I want to develop my abilities in photography and video to where at some point, it's going to take a period of time, some point where I might be able to make money from my photos, to be able to at least sell my photography at some point after I have accumulated all these beautiful photos. You know, at some point having new prospects, people paying me to go on projects maybe. I wanted to do wedding photography, all kinds of really cool stuff with the camera. That was my goal. My goal was not to eventually, travel a little bit and then just stop after everything I've sacrificed to get this far. You know, I sold everything I owned when I was living in Salem, Oregon, working at Costco. I sold everything so I could pursue this idea I've had to travel perpetually and see as much of the world as possible and learn as much about the world as possible while doing photography and sharing that with whoever was following my channel to inspire people to do great things with their own life. That's what I wanted to accomplish. But every time I returned home, my dad didn't want to hear any of that. He did not want to hear it. Okay, why? No fucking clue. But every time, him and I would always just get in arguments to such an extent I would just stop talking to him, because every time we talk, it's just getting into an argument about stupid shit. It's always like, when are you going to stop doing what you're doing, Brandon, and get a job? It's like, well, I'm trying to build a lifestyle, but apparently you just don't understand, or you just don't care. Whatever you got going on in your brain, I don't understand. But when I came back from Hawaii, I tried sharing the things I had learned from Grant with my mom and dad. I think both at the same time. You know, when I came back, I told them about learning. I learned that we might not necessarily live on a spinning globe, but our Earth might actually be flat, or that we might be on a flat plane encompassed by a dome, like a terrarium, and that God's real. And, you know, tell it, like, because you gotta understand, like, before I went to Hawaii, I didn't even believe in God. I believed in evolution. I was, you know, call me an atheist or whatever. Before that, I did not believe in God at all. Just because I was brainwashed, you know, from high school, from, like, junior year of high school when I first came across learning about evolution, and then everything I learned in college. Realistically, I was just brainwashed to believe that in science and this idea in science, and there's no such thing as God, or or spirit or any of that. It was just, we were just all a product of a big bang. That was my, that was what I had been told and taught. And you get a full-on college education where you're paying to go to classes to learn about this stuff. That's what I believed. We're not even getting the option of seeing this other perspective, never even hearing about a flat earth until I met Grant. Until, like, 3 or 4 years after college, never even heard of flat earth ever. Okay, so all I did was learn about it. I just heard about it, learned about it. Grant shared what he knew about it while I was in Hawaii. So, that's just one topic. I'm not even necessarily going to get into the other topics, about all this other conspiracy stuff or whatever. It's what I learned about chemtrails, it's when I learned about a lot of really messed up stuff about this world that I had never heard of prior to Hawaii, which I found really strange. Why have I never heard about this stuff? Not even like a discussion or just like, oh, have you heard about this crazy theory or idea? No, never even heard of it. Okay, so when I come home from Hawaii, I try telling both my mom and dad this stuff. Like, yeah, I believe in God now. My mom was super thrilled when I told her I came home and I believe in God. Like, I found God. She was super thrilled about that. Okay, well, what does that even mean? You find God. Okay, well, I also found out that we might live in a terrarium type thing. Like, this is a big flat plane and it's all encompassed by a dome. And if you think that's weird, okay, well, they've made TV shows under the dome. There's so much symbolism for this flat earth idea. That kind of really, just kind of dropping clues for people that are paying attention. And then if you actually learn about flat earth and hear about how you can test it for yourself and you go apply it in the real world, yeah, it actually seems pretty plausible. I'm not saying I know exactly where we live, but at some point I'll explain my experiences with DMT and mushrooms, and I'm pretty sure we live in some type of terrarium type thing. Like, everybody's stuck inside this realm, and nobody can leave this realm unless they're given permission by some higher entities or God or something. You have to pass a series of tests. And these things I would learn at a later time. But when I came home, I tried telling them, I tried sharing as much with them as Grant had shared with me, just to, Grant gave that information to me for free. And he told me, how special I was and that I have a very important task ahead of me. And I didn't know what he meant at the time. But I tried sharing it with my mom and dad, and they treated me like I had lost my mind. Okay? They literally just treating me like I've just had just straight up just gone crazy, and I couldn't understand why are you treating me like this? Like, they wouldn't believe anything I had to say. They completely like lost it when I even brought up flat Earth. And then when I started mentioning like chemtrails, like the fact that there's been this long period of time where we're being intentionally sprayed, like all across the world, just like there's fleets of aircraft that dump shit in the sky, and then they can manipulate our weather. It's called geoengineering. I mean, whether or not you personally believe it, or you're aware of it, or you're completely ignorant of it, I'm not going to get into that right now. That's not the point. You're either aware or you're not. If you're not, you should probably maybe look it up. If you're in denial, it's just a product of your own brainwashing. Or, then there's the people who say it's not real, but a lot of the people who are just adamant that it's not real, they're part of they're the bad guys, and that's their job, is to keep people from asking questions. Comes those ATVs. I'm just waiting because they create noise. I thought there was 3 of them. Yeah, anyways. So, like I said, I'm not trying to tell you to believe it or not. That's not the point of this. I'm saying the things that I learned in Hawaii, I tried coming home and sharing it with my parents. And they were treating me as if I had lost my mind. And I didn't understand why. Could not fucking get it. Not only did I learn a bunch of stuff, I tried telling them about my death experience. And apparently that's not really anything concerning, or they didn't even care. Apparently, I mean, nothing. It wasn't as significant to actually like consider that. You know, maybe I came home with a little bit of PTSD from that. They don't give a fuck. Apparently, at least my dad didn't. I mean, I can't really recall how my mom was responding. I think she was just kind of staying out of the way of it, just because my dad would just, he always just gets crazy, and more or less, especially when every night he drinks a shit ton of alcohol. He drinks, to this day, he drinks like a half gallon of whiskey every week. Every single week he buys another half gallon of whiskey, and by the time the week rolls over, he has a new half gallon of whiskey because he's drank the other one. He's like, the alcoholism in him has been going on for a very long time, and especially since Hawaii, for sure. It's just, from my observations, it's just been gradually getting worse. Just wait for this person to pass. I've seen them. They've been zipping back and forth all for the last few hours. Um, but when I keep bringing him up, at some point you will understand the significance of why I keep bringing him up. It has nothing to do with daddy issues or father. No, this is some real deal shit that's not just affecting me, but it's affecting a lot of people beyond me. But at the same time, it is so significant. Had he had his way, back on June 14th, I would not be here right now. I would be locked up, and everything that I have shared since then and that I intend to share here in the next few weeks, months, years, if I end up surviving that long, would not exist had him and whoever else was involved, had they entrapped me and I got arrested on this past June 14th off of some bullshit and getting framed and set up. I'm looking forward to sharing that segment of the story, but it's not going to be till later. I'm just kind of like hinting at it. Every time I'm bringing all this up, I'm just like, I'm hinting at it. That way it's in your mind, so once we get there, you're going to learn some pretty significant stuff. Okay? That's my objective. I'm letting you know ahead of time. So rewind back to me coming back from Hawaii. This is 2016. I believe this is like April-ish, around April. I believe that's what it was. So I'm only home for a little bit of period of time. I can't even stand being there because of how I'm being treated upon coming home from Hawaii. Not only did all these things happen to me, I tried sharing to them. They thought I lost my mind. I also came home without any money. Remember, because I wasn't able to make any money after I died. I tried making money, but all my abilities to do any kind of photography in Hawaii just kind of stopped. So I pretty much came home empty-handed. Well, what are you gonna do now, Brandon? You gotta get a job. Okay, whatever. If I'm gonna get a job, I'm not staying here in Central Oregon, which is exactly what happened. I can't recall the exact day or time that I ended up leaving Oregon, but I ended up started looking for work because I knew I needed to find some type of income. I had to work for a period of time if I was gonna be able to move forward from where I currently was. So I ended up, considering I had lived here in Wyoming, just remember, I lived in Wyoming for 9 months and then went to Big Island for 7 months. So while I was here in Wyoming, I had done a bunch of jobs with the guy that taught me how to do photography and how to do video editing. And we did some jobs out at some ranches and stuff, so I got to see ranches, like people who work as ranch hands and work with horses, and it looked like a really fun type of summer job because we spent a few days out at this one really giant ranch that had like 100 horses and cabins and stuff. It looked like a really fun type of job to, just to have an experience. So when I started looking for a job after coming back from Hawaii, I got on Craigslist and I started looking for any ranch hand jobs that say a ranch in Wyoming or Colorado. Got the owner looking for people to help out for the summer, for like a seasonal type position. Like So that's what I did. I got on Craigslist and I found a few. You know, I applied for one in Colorado, which was just a ranch hand job up in White River National Forest. Some guy that needed to be a ranch hand and a horse guide. The place I applied for, the guy was some type of lodge up in the mountains. He had a bunch of horses, and he would do backcountry horse guiding trips up to these high alpine lakes and allow people to go fishing or camping. He had a website, looked pretty cool and everything. So I applied for this job through Craigslist, and then eventually, you know, I can't remember, a few days later, I ended up getting a phone call from the owner. And long story short, he offered me the job, but considering I didn't have a vehicle when I came back from Hawaii, I no longer had my motorcycle, and I no longer had my Toyota. I didn't have a vehicle. You know, just like when I went to Wyoming, I had to take a Greyhound bus to get to. All right. Timer. So the question is, how was I going to get to Colorado this time without a vehicle? Well, I got on Craigslist again, and at the time, you know, this is 2016. This is before the world was getting as crazy and messed up as it is today. So it wasn't as scary to put myself in kind of risky situations. And what I'm saying is, I got on Craigslist. There's a category called rideshare. Okay. So, for example, rideshare is a option where you have people that are driving across the country or across state, and they need help with gas money, or they have extra seats available, and they're offering to invite a stranger or somebody who's going in the same direction a ride, and they split the gas and stuff. If the world was a good place, it's a pretty cool idea, you know, just kind of allow people to come together and carpool greater distances and stuff. But in today's world, it's kind of sketchy, kind of weird. But that's what I did. I put out an ad on Craigslist, and I said that, you know, I just put my intentions. I said I'm based out of Central Oregon, and I'm trying to get to this destination in Colorado. Anybody heading this direction, and you have an available seat, I can split gas money with you. And then just put that out there. So if there's anybody that happened to see it, they would contact me. Maybe, you know, that was my hope. And that's what I told the owner of that lodge. I said, I'll figure out a way to get to Colorado. Fortunately enough for me, that email worked. I got some woman contacted me, some mom, and she said her adult son, he's like in his young 20s apparently. This is what she told me. You know, I don't recall if it was strictly email, or if I spoke to her on the phone. But she said her son was driving from, I think, like the valley, like driving from like Eugene, Oregon, or Salem, or some different part of Oregon, from there all the way to like Chicago, a long ass drive. And she said that he'd be willing to give me a ride because they somehow found my ad. How did they find my ad? I don't know. They just did. I was getting contacted. But yeah, I guess she said her son's driving to Colorado, and he's driving through Central Oregon and would pick me up if I wanted to accept the ride. And so I did. So I ended up, you know, just as I gave him the address, and then at some point, you know, I got a hold of the owner and told him I'd be there within a few days, and then I just packed 2 backpacks like I did with coming into Wyoming. Just packed whatever I could carry, and just somebody showed up in front of my parents' house where I was had been staying for a few weeks, and then I just got in their vehicle, and then it was just one person. It was just a younger guy. He was younger than me. He's probably like 4 years younger than I was. Seemed like a nice person. I didn't get any weird vibes from him. Seemed like a good person. So I ended up getting in the vehicle, and then we took off. Like, that was the last I saw my parents until like 80 or 75 days later or something like that. Yeah, from their perspective, they just watched me get in some stranger's car and take off. Just was saying, all right, I'll see you. And that's how bad the family dynamics was, the situation at the time. Like, that's how bad they were treating me, to such an extent I was willing to just do that. Just get in somebody's car and supposed ride share, and yeah, we're heading east. I'm gonna get dropped off in Colorado. Okay. So the person, I don't know his name. Just say I'm not even gonna make up a name. I'll just say kid. He's younger than me. He's a kid. I don't like the word kid, but whatever. It's just. So he says, young guy with me, or I'm in the same vehicle as him. He's pretty friendly. We ended up chatting most of the way, and then he picked me up in the evening. So as we were leaving Central Oregon, we were driving into, it was getting into sunset and then the dark. So he ended up allowing me to drive his vehicle too. We took turns, and we pretty much drove all the way from Oregon to my destination, Colorado, without stopping. We just took turns driving the whole time. At some point during the middle of the night, when it was his turn to drive, I'm sitting in the front passenger seat, and I fell asleep. Told him I was gonna go to sleep because, just so I could get a little rest, and then when he gets tired, I'd take over. And I told him, I was like, if you start getting tired, you wake me up. Don't you fall asleep while you're driving. He said, I won't. Right. So I fall asleep, right? And I'm asleep, and all of a sudden, I wake up feeling the car going over the white line on the right-hand side as we're drifting off into the road. I look over. He's fucking fall asleep. I grab the fucking steering wheel and turn it, recorrect us. Like, we were going to go off the highway. We were going like 65 miles, 70 miles an hour. Whatever, something made me wake up just to see that this was, guardian angel. something woke me up to see what was going on, and I corrected it and yelled at him. He's like, oh shit! But from that point forward, I was like, you're not driving anymore, I'm driving. So I drove his car, he fell asleep, and we ended up arriving in Colorado like a day and a half later, or maybe the next day. I don't remember. I think we only drove one night. It wasn't 2 nights. I think we arrived in my destination like late afternoon, like within 24 hours of leaving Central Oregon. So we arrived in this little tiny farming community. The lodge that I was working at was supposedly like 20 or 30 miles up in the mountains. And so my ride, the ride share, he wasn't going all the way up there. He just dropped me off in this little farming community. It was like, Meeker, Colorado. That was the name of the community. Yeah. So he drops me off at this little like convenience store, and then that was the last to see him. He just takes off, continues driving to Chicago supposedly. And I was like, dude, you need to sleep. You don't drive that whole way without sleeping. You're gonna wreck. I was really concerned about if he was even gonna be able to make it, because he was, I don't know, he didn't sound like he was wanting to sleep. So I don't even know if he got there alive. The whole thing's weird. But that's how I got to Meeker. It was just a ride share from Craigslist. Don't know anything about the person who gave me a ride, and all I know is that he was supposed to go to Chicago. And then I get dropped off at a convenience store, and then I had the phone number of the owner of the lodge and let him know I was there, and then within like 30 minutes or so he shows up, and so I get picked up by another guy that I've never met before. And we just take off into the mountains, 30 miles into the mountains in his truck, just based off my faith that everything was as I thought it was. Okay? So when I accepted this job, I was told I was going to be a ranch hand / horse guide. So whenever the lodge had guests, and you had guests that wanted to go backcountry fishing or backcountry camping, and they wanted to take our horses or his horses, as a guided trip up into the thing, I would be part of the guides with helping with getting all the horses saddled and then loaded in the trailer, driven up there, and then we ride up into the mountains. Seemed really cool. Seemed like a really fun job. And then also ranch hand work, which involves, taking care of the horses, taking care of the lodge and ranch area, keeping things clean, doing chores and all that shit, everything, the whole shebang, I thought it was going to be a lot of fun. It seems like a pretty cool job to have for the whole summer. And then on top of that, once elk hunting season began, the guy operated his lodge as a elk hunting out. They people who have their elk hunting licenses and permits or tags, they can go up there. They can use his lodge and the cabins as a place to camp, like a home base, or they can bring their own horses or rent his horses and then take these big caravans up into the mountains, and then you'd have big elk camps all over the place. And being part of that, helping with the whole thing. And so not only was the experience was that going to be really cool, from what I was told, the tips were going to be amazing too. And then when I had accepted the job, he said all of the, supposedly there was going to be like between 5 and 7 ranch hands, 5 to 7 people helping out around. And then all employees would work 5 days and get 2 days off. And then we each get our own room, we each get a cabin and with our own bed. And then we get meals, we get breakfast and dinner. So we didn't have to worry about meals. So it seemed like a pretty cool thing, It wasn't, from when I accepted the job, it seemed like something like a really cool experience that I'm being allowed to have, which is why I was so willing to get out there. But it's kind of how people put out bait just to trick people into situations. Once I was out there, after a period of time, I kind of learned that wasn't what I was expecting. When the owner picked me up, he seemed like an okay person. I didn't really see anything about him. He was really quiet and he didn't really talk much. Okay, he's just a silent type. Okay, he lives out in the country. He's a silent type. Maybe he's just kind of shy around new people. Maybe he's just kind of feeling me out. Whatever. But he doesn't really talk much. But we did talk on the way up there. And it was still pretty early in the season. I think it was it might have still been April, or it might have been early May. But when we got up there, it's Colorado up in the mountains, so there's still snow around his property and stuff. Some of the areas are still kind of buried. And the lodge wasn't open yet. There was still a lot of prep work to do. And when I got there, there was only 2 other ranch hands that were there at the time. There was an older gal. She was probably in her early 40s. When I say older, I don't mean she's old. She's older than me. So she's in her early 40s, and I'm 27 or so at the time. It's her, and then there's an 18-year-old girl that had just graduated high school, and this is her first summer job since graduating high school. They were the first 2 that had arrived, and then it was me, and then supposedly there was going to be another ranch hand that was going to arrive within that same week. And then supposedly there's going to be other ones. The same day that I get there, as soon as we get to the lodge, apparently there's all kinds of tension between the owner and the older lady. There's already drama there. This is just me getting there. Apparently she had been there for a while, and she's been there's just already friction between them. I don't remember what it's all about, but she ended up quitting that same day. So it was kind of oh shit, where am I? And then it was the next day or the following day. It's just me and that 18-year-old girl. She's from, I don't know, I think she was from Colorado also, just from a different area. She's not related to the owner. She just found the job like I did through Craigslist. She was pretty nice. So it was just her and I doing chores for the first day. And then then there's this 19-year-old guy that shows up he's from New Mexico. He was another ranch hand. So he shows up the next day. So there's 3 of us now. So the 3 of us are running around together doing all these different chores that the owner's giving us. Right? And so the owner's not really talking to us at all. He's not giving us any direction or any really good communication. So we just don't even know what the hell we're doing. We're just kind of waiting on him. At some point, the owner leaves the ranch. He just takes off in his truck, doesn't tell us anything, doesn't tell us the rules of the place. He just takes off, and we're okay. And then, we hadn't really been given a tour of the area. We didn't really know the area, so we got in the truck of the the other guy that had showed, the 19-year-old guy when he showed up. So we get in his truck, and we just go take off driving down the road, start exploring the area. So the lodge is left unattended. But we hadn't been given any rules. We weren't told we weren't allowed to leave. The owner never told us that we were not allowed to leave, like we're fucking slaves or prisoners or anything. So he left, so we left because we didn't have anything to do. We went all the way back into Meeker and checked out the area, and then by the time we came back, the owner had to come back. And as soon as we get out, he just starts chewing us out for leaving his property unattended. We're like, what the hell? Like, okay. So then he just has this bad attitude towards all three of us. You know, I'm 27, and then you got a 19-year-old guy and an 18-year-old girl. And I don't know how, this guy's in his 40s or whatever. This is his property. We don't know where we're at. And so he's all of a sudden pissed off at us. He tells the girl to go do some chores. And then he tells the other guy and me to get our boots on. And then he just starts walking up this mountain and he tells us to follow him. And we're just like, okay. So he's like, he just starts making us hike up this really steep mountain. And we don't even know where we're going or what we're doing. But eventually we come across this big, long story short, like the fresh water supply for the lodge came from a spring that was like, 3/4 of a mile away up this mountain. And there was a big long pipe that came all the way down from that spring that fed the lodge and allowed the lodge to have fresh water. Somewhere along that pipe, it was clogged, or the pipe had been broken either by an animal or something falling on it, whatever. And so he wasn't telling us what we were doing, but we had to go find what it was. And he's just hiking up this really steep thing, and he's just being a douche, like an asshole to us, to me and the other guy, the whole time. And I'm just like, what is this? What is this? All right. Long story short with that, we end up having to fix it, and then it was just a multi-hour thing. And then we come back down. The owner was like, never talked to us at all, ever. All he did was just tell us what to do. Never friendly. And at some point, he gave us like a job of, like, the horses, since it was still early in the season, the horses were not up there yet. They're still down in pasture, down in Meeker in lower elevation. But the stable area and where he keeps all the horses, the corral, I guess it would be the corral, all the barbed wire fencing needed to be fixed and needed to be tightened. We had to start prepping for getting all the horses there and getting prepared for guests and all this stuff. So he starts giving us all these tasks, but he's never with us, helping us. He just tells us to do shit, and then if we don't do it right, gets all mad at us, even though it's his property. We don't know really we don't know where anything's at. We have to get oriented with everything, all this stuff, but he's just not helping. And so at some point, the other 19-year-old, him and the owner, they end up getting in a big argument. This might be, I got a bug underneath my clothes. Whew. Not a bee. Him and that 19-year-old and him, they ended up getting in a big argument, and that kid quit. He ended up just quitting. He went and found a job like 20 miles down the road at a different ranch with some people that I guess were nicer, more respectful of their employees. But I ended up sticking around. So it's just that 19-year-old girl and I. And at some point the ranch opens up and we start having guests come in. And so on my very first horse trip, like I'm not trained. Like I told the owner before he even hired me, like I've ridden horses a number of times, but I'm not by any means a experienced horse person. I don't even I told him I would need to know how. You're gonna have to teach me how to saddle a horse and the whole shebang that is involved with taking care of a horse, saddling a horse, and all that. So how to do it correctly. Yeah, I told him that. I was like, but I'm a hard worker in the physical in the aspect of labor. I'll be able. You just give me tasks and I'll be able to get it done. But it's like, if you can teach me how to do the horse part, I can do what I can, help you out. I didn't know how many people he had applying. So he knew that when he hired me. So now fast forward to when I'm at that job, my very first horse guiding trip. Like I'm not was not a certified guide or a licensed guide or anything like that. Like I'm pretty much a rookie, if you want to label it as anything. I got a minute 26. Oh, I'm just gonna stop it and then I'll start over. So I'm just like a rookie, right? And I don't really know what I'm doing. So we have these, I think it was like a party of like four. These guys wanted to go fishing up in the mountains, which requires four horses, and then for the guests, and then a horse, like the owner's wife was there, and then so a horse for her and a horse for me. So six horses all together. So this was my first time riding the horses out there. The owner had showed me how to saddle a horse like one time. He showed me the whole thing. For some reason, he thought I should know how to remember everything and should have it all memorized and be efficient at it 100% just off first time. Even though he never like told me to do it over and over while he watched until I got it down. Not even once. He just like showed me how to do it and then like, okay, go. Okay. So, but he has his wife coming with us on this guided trip. I don't even know where we're going. Like, so as far as I'm concerned, it's his wife that would be, it's from my perspective, okay, his wife is leading it. She's going to be helping me. This is what I'm thinking before we even leave. She's going to help me with any questions I have, and she knows where we're going, and, I'm just following her lead, so to speak. Okay. But the way it turns out, the owner has me drive he has a few different trucks there. He has a truck, he had his primary truck that he drove, and then he had another big diesel truck that had a fifth wheel and could haul it's like a trailer that could haul like 8 horses at a time around there. So he lets me drive that truck and with the trailer. Never driven the big trailer before, but he just gives me the truck and it has me drive with the trailer, and his wife is riding passenger. And so I'm expected to know how to pull this thing. I said I would do it, and I did. Never got any wrecks, so to speak. Just let you know. I figured out how to drive a big ass diesel 6-speed shift with a big trailer load of horses. I learned how to do that. It was pretty fun. But we end up driving like, I don't know, 10 miles from the lodge to this trailhead. His wife is, I'm telling her, it's like, I hope you can help me because it's my first time. She says she's wooden stuff. So we get to the spot. We get all the horses unloaded. Horses are all saddled. The guests are with us. One of the guests is kind of obese. He probably weighs around 300 pounds, like 275, 300 pounds. It's a pretty big person to be riding a horse. So everything starts off smooth, and I think his wife was leading, and I was on the tail, and then you got the guests in the middle. So we start riding up the mountains. It was a pretty long ride. It was probably like an 8-mile ride to the lake that we were heading, and then the guests were planning on camping there for a few days, and then we'd come back and get them. We made it. We were about halfway there, and then the guy that was kind of obese. His saddle was like this. I think it's the belt. I forget the name of stuff. The belt that goes under the belly of the horse. It started coming loose, and so like as he's sitting, he's starting to like slide. He's trying to slide. You could see it, so he tells us that we need to fix it. So I'm like, because I'm not professional at saddling horses, and I don't know what's too tight or what's the appropriate tightness. Like, I tried getting the owner's wife to do it. I was like, can you do it? Because you know what I needed, what needs to be done, because this is a big guy. But she has me tighten the thing, and I tighten it as tight as I thought would be. I thought it was tight enough, You're tightening as hard as you can on a horse, and damn, that looked like it'd be really uncomfortable on the horse having it that tight. But I did as tight as I could, right? And then so the saddle's secure, and then the guy gets back on, and it's fine. So we get almost all the way to the lake that we're gonna drop him off, and then the guy he's obese, and we're riding through this like really rugged part, so he's going like this, and from the back I could just see him starting to slide, and he's not doing anything. He's just like this, and he's not doing anything, and he literally falls off of his horse, and he lands on a rock, and he lands right on his ribs. He might have broke a rib right then. But he ended up cracked it or something. It wasn't too severe, But he did hurt himself, but he was acting like it wasn't too bad. We ended up riding the rest of the way after he got back on his horse. But, me, I felt really bad, like, because I'm the one that tightened it, and then it still came undone. But if he's really obese, is it my fault? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I thought I tightened it really tight. But also at the same time, I don't know why the owner's wife was not the one. She either needed to be standing at my shoulder just to overwatch me and tell me yes or no, and then I could tighten it more if it wasn't. Or she could have done it, but she didn't. And so I have no idea why. I was looking at her as the lead. I'm learning. But that happened, right? He fell, hurt himself, acted like it wasn't a big deal. We ended up riding the rest of the way, dropping them off, all their camping gear. We had panniers and all this stuff. After we dropped them off, they were staying the night. Okay. Oh, I didn't even start this. They were staying the night. And so it's just the owner's wife and myself. We have to ride all the way back to the truck and trailer and get the horses loaded. So, we have to return another, I'm pretty sure it's 6 to 8 miles each way. So, it takes a while to get back there. His wife's quiet the whole time, not really talking to me. We're each ponying different, we're each ponying horses. So I'm pulling a few, she's pulling a few. We eventually make it down, get the horses loaded in the trailer, and then we make it back to the lodge. And then at some point, his wife tells her husband what happens. From that point forward, this is like the first week that the ranch, the lodge had been open to guests, so it's still pretty early in the season. Okay. Because the guy had fallen off and hurt himself, and because I was the one that had tightened the thing, his wife put the blame on me, and at that point forward, the owner did not let me go on any more guided trips. For a long time. I only got to go on two or three more horse riding trips for the entire season that I worked there. After that event, all the owner did, was use me as labor around his ranch to do all this crappy, shitty work. Okay. So I told you that one 19-year-old guy, he quit. Within it was the next day or the same day that the guy quit, another 19-year-old or 18-year-old, he might have been 18, but another 18 or 19-year-old guy, he shows up. It's like the same day, and there's just this weird, awkward person leaving and person coming at the same time. Because, the person leaving, he's leaving because the owner's pretty much an asshole. And the new guy has no idea. He's just all excited to be there. And then the girl and I, we've been there since, we've been observing all this, and we're just don't even really know what to expect anymore. But the one guy leaves, and then the other guy shows up. He's like I said, he's 18 or 19. So it's the three of us now. So from that point forward, I was being used as a laborer, and the girl was used as the guide. Whenever they actually had guests come and they were they wanted to go horse riding, the owner would always pick her to go do the guided trips, so she's never doing any chores or labor work around the ranch. And then every once in a while, the 19-year-old would get to go with her, or he would get to go do a different guide with a different group, but I would never get to go. And then third in line, the owner would go do the guided trips, and I was left to babysit the fucking lodge with all these different chores and shit to do. That rubbed me wrong, okay? When I took the job, there were supposed to be at least 5 people there working, 5 ranch hands, guides. That way all the work is not all being dumped on just a few. But it was just the 3 of us. At some point, I was supposed to be making, I said there was going to be room and board and meals. So that also counts into what you might be getting paid, kind of makes what you're getting paid a little less. So I was supposed to be getting $1,100 per month plus tips. I think that's what the thing, which is pretty shit. $1,100 in a month is not very much. But the tips were supposed to be a big part. But since I wasn't getting to do any of the guided trips, I wasn't getting any tips. So when I tell you that the owner was literally working me like a slave, I could tell stories and stories and stories about this ranch experience. but it would take a long time, and it's not necessarily really important. That overall, once the owner realized that I could work really hard, and the girl worked pretty hard, and the other guy worked pretty hard, that he literally stopped looking for help. He just decided that he could save a lot of money by not hiring anybody else and just using the three of us like slaves. So since we were on like an hourly or a monthly salary, so to speak, even though it was shit, he worked us to death. Like my work day started before sunrise, and it didn't end until the sun had gone down. So I was working. I think I was working like 14 to 16 hour days every day. And I think I was working like between 100 to 120 hours per week. And then at some point I ended up doing the math based off what I was getting paid divided by the total hours per week. I was only getting paid between like $1.50 and $2 an hour for some of the hardest work I've ever done. As far as all the different jobs I've had, that was probably the hardest job I've ever had. He gave me such shit work for no reason. At some point, he ended up buying two sled dog team, Huskies, sled dogs. They had been retired. They used to be like competitive sled dogs, but they'd already been through their careers, and now they're pretty much retired sled dogs, but they can still pull. So he bought like, maybe not two teams, I think he bought like 10 dogs. So he buys like 10 Huskies, or it might have been a dozen of them. There was like 2 or 3 females and I think like around 9 males. So he ended up having me and one of the other guy ranch hand. We had to cut down like a whole bunch of dead trees that were around the property on this hillside with chainsaws. So we probably fell probably around 40 dead trees. Had to cut them all to certain sizes and then roll them down the hill, and then get them all the way to this big area. He built like this. It was like an 80-foot by 100-foot dog pen, and all of the posts that he used were trees that we had cut down from the forest. Dead trees that were part of his property. So that's worth the materials, and then he went into town and bought all the wire. So we had to build that for him, and then dig all the post holes by hand. Oh my God, it took weeks to do. It was very hard. And then he ended up buying some pasture like a few miles away, and we had to put up barbed wire fence. And the amount of bugs, flies, and insects that I got attacked by, you're just swarmed by insects. You can't even work when you're just getting swarmed. You got hundreds of flies landing on you. The worst work I've ever fucking done in my life. And I was only getting paid a couple dollars an hour. When I realized that, it was just like, kind of really ruined it for me. At some point, we had these guests. Like there was a line, like there was a line that broke, around day 60. Was when there was a line broke when I was just like, I'm not going to stay here any longer. I'm getting ready I just don't care. This is bullshit. I just stuck it out as long as I did for the experience, just because I was there. It's like, just put it up with. I was in pretty good physical shape. I was really strong. But I got to spend a lot of time with horses, even though I wasn't being allowed to go ride them. I was down with the horses every day, down in the corral and stuff. We had to take care of them. But there was eventually a line that got crossed, that the owner crossed, to where I was just like, fuck this, I'm out of here. And it really came down to being accused of things that I had nothing to do with. For example, we had, like I said, there's 2 other ranch hands. They're two younglings. They're not younglings, but an 18 and 19-year-old, or 2 18-year-olds, whatever. There was one evening, we had these guests come in the evening. These like 2 women, and they brought 2 mules. Like they were gonna ride their mules up into the mountains, and they were staying at the lodge for a few days. So we were gonna put their mules in a makeshift pen, or makeshift corral, temporary corral to keep them separated from our horses. So the owner gave us this responsibility to set up this makeshift corral for the mules and then get them hay and water and stuff. Well, we do follow all these steps that the owner had given us, and we got the mules, all this, and then one thing we didn't give them was the hay. And I told the girl, I was like, we need to feed them before we, call it a night. And she's like, no, they're fine. Like the girl, was like, we're fine. We don't have to do these things. The owners of the mules, they'll take care of it and stuff. So I just let it go. I was like, okay. This girl says, because she gets to ride the horses all the time, and she's pretty much in charge of the horses, has a say-so, while I'm doing all the labor over on this side. So, okay, that's what she says, that's what we'll do. So I just let it go. At some point, like 45 minutes later, I'm just going about my business. I was pretty much clocked out for the night. I'm just done working because it's almost dark. All of a sudden, the owner comes out of nowhere, and he just starts yelling at me specifically, blaming me for the mules not having enough food. And I telling him, I was like, she's the one that said all this. He would not believe it. So this girl just walked free, even though she's the one that laid it down. I got in trouble for it, and he was being a straight up asshole to me, would not let it go. So that really rubbed me wrong, because I just keep getting all these things happening. It's not necessarily my fault. I'm doing what I can to communicate with everybody around me, but somehow when things go wrong, it's my fucking fault. Okay, so that rubbed me wrong. Okay, and then I'd say probably I don't know, a week later, the 19-year-old guy that showed up, like his first day, he had a fake ID, because we're in Colorado and marijuana's legal. He came from, I don't know, he had a fake ID, so he was able to go into different dispensaries in Colorado and buy weed for himself. So when he showed up his first day, he showed up with a whole bunch of weed, a few joints. The joints come in these little plastic containers. So yeah, I smoked weed with him. Like, why not? I smoke weed. I mean, if any of you guys know me, you should know. Anybody that knows me knows that I smoke weed. It's not a big deal. But he shows up with it, so it's like he brought it and he's offered to share with me, so I smoke with him. Big deal. But for some reason, he had dropped one of the plastic containers, and it had been kind of covered up in the grass outside the patio, because him and I were sharing a cabin. So at some point, that 19-year-old, he'd been working there for over a month. So I think that container had been laying there for that long, just kind of hidden. I never noticed it. But at some point, after I got accused for the girl's mistake, it was like a week later, the owner taught me how to drive his Bobcat, so the other two didn't know how to drive the Bobcat, the skidster with the bucket. So every week or so, we'd have to scoop up all the horse poop every morning, and 3 times a day. Part of the routine was scooping horse poop. So you go from the corral, we have a wheelbarrow, you fill the wheelbarrow up with horse poop, and once the wheelbarrow is full, because he has 30 horses, so it's a lot of shit. It's a lot of horse poop. So then, once the wheelbarrow is full, you have to haul it out of the corral, and there's just one big pile that you just have of horse poop. After about a week, it's like a giant mountain of horse poop. It's a lot. And you'd have to use his Bobcat / skidster with a bucket and go scoop up giant heaps of the poop and then haul it to a specific spot on his property where all the manure goes, right? I'm the only one that knows how to do that. And so, after this incident with the girl and I got accused of her mistake and got in trouble for it, even though I tried communicating with the owner, let him know what happened. He didn't want to hear it. So fast forward, it's early in the morning, and I'm running this skidster, hauling this manure back and forth. It's a fucking it was a disgusting job. It stunk so bad. The owner comes out of nowhere, and he just stands in my way and blocks my path, and just telling me to turn off the skidster and get out. Okay, so I get out. I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. He looks pissed. And then he just goes off on me, just starts yelling at me about all kinds of stupid shit. This has nothing to do with me. Just accuse me all this stuff, and I'm just not having it. So I just return fire and just defend myself. He pulls out some the plastic marijuana container. It's just an empty joint container that the other guy had brought. and he found it. And so he's all getting on my ass about this and saying he's all going to call the national, the national forest ranger or whatever, have him come arrest me and stuff. Dang clock. But yeah, I don't know where it ended on the last video, but essentially, getting blamed for other people's mistakes and then trying to communicate it with the owner and him not wanting to believe me or hear it, it really rubbed me the wrong way. And the fact that I was making so little, not making much money, and then I wasn't being allowed to go on guided trips. Sorry, Malaki's laying right at the bottom of the tripod. I wasn't being allowed to go on any guided trips, so I wasn't making any tips. Meanwhile, the girl was making a shit ton of tips, and I'm working my ass off at the ranch while she goes off and has fun with the horses and hangs out with the guests all day at the lake or go fishing, like literally having a great time and making good money, and I'm making shit. It was not cool. And then after he interrupted me while I was operating his skidster hauling horse manure, and then started yelling at me and would not listen to anything I have to say, it rubbed me really wrong. I wasn't going to have that. It really felt like he knew that I didn't have a vehicle, and he was taking advantage of that situation where he felt like he could say whatever and tell me to do whatever, and I would do it, and he could treat me however he wanted because I didn't have, and through his mind, through his perspective, I didn't have a way to leave. Like I was being held, sorry, my alarm, like being held a hostage or as a slave. That's kind of what it was like, being paid pretty much nothing. So at some point, I just made a decision to quit. And I just decided I'll figure out a way to make it back. Back to Oregon. It didn't matter at this point. I said I'll end up walking all the way back to Oregon if I need to. Like, I gotta get away from this person. You understand this is 70 days, and I'm trying to tell you about this experience within an hour. So obviously there's going to be a lot of details and stuff that I'm not even mentioning, but I'm just trying to give you a general idea of what happened after I came back from Hawaii and then what my next steps were. But yeah, I ended up quitting there I'm pretty sure it was on my 70th day. It was between 70 and 75 days. But it was like early, I stayed the night. When I decided I was going to quit, that morning, it was right at right early in the morning, the owner was in the main lodge down in his little office, and I just walked up and told him I was quitting. Told him why, and I said I'll end up working throughout the day if you want me to, or I can, just leave. He ended up having me, he ended up letting the other ranch hand and myself go take 2 horses to go ride this trail up into the mountains, and clear, like, the trail had some deadfall, so he wanted us to use saws and stuff to clear the trees off the path so guided trips could go up there without any issues. But that was like the 3rd or 4th time I even got to ride horses. But my last day, that's what he allowed us to do, was just take 2 horses up into the mountains. And we did. We rode this trail all the way up to this lake, and the other ranch hand and I, we ended up stripping down into our underwear. We went swimming in the lake. Who cares? It wasn't anything weird. It was just like, it was summertime, really hot, had just busted our ass cutting out all this deadfall. We're wearing jeans and stuff, so you're not going to go jump in the lake in your jeans. So we just stripped down our boxers, just went swimming in the lake for like 45 minutes, and then we rode the horses back down the mountain. It was a pretty fun trip. I had a lot of fun, but then once we got back down to the lodge, it was like middle of the afternoon. The owner didn't want me around the property anymore, and he just told me that the other ranch hand, he could drive me into town. So I ended up getting a ride into town from the Nitro guy. The owner only paid me half of what he owed for those 70 days, and he said that he didn't I had to wait till the end of the month before he would pay the other half, as far as like the way he would be able to have the money for it. So I had to leave. I left that job on a promise that that owner would pay the other half at some point. And after all that work I did for 70 days, he only gave me $1,100 fucking dollars. Altogether for 70 days, I only made $2,400 for doing some of the hardest work. Or not even 20. What's that? Yeah. It was around $2,400 for 2 months worth of work. It's crazy, like being like a slave. But so he gives me a check for $1,200. I don't have any way to cash it. When I went to that job, I didn't really have any money, so I only had like $200 or whatever in cash and a check for $1,200 with no way. No, his bank was like 3 hours away. There wasn't his bank was not in that nearest town. It was in like Grand Junction or something. So I couldn't cash the check. I only had a little bit of money, like a little bit of cash. So the ranch hand dropped me off in Meeker, Colorado. It was a tiny little town, and so that night I spent like $50 to $60 on a hotel room, which is when I made a plan on how I was going to make it back to Oregon. And I decided I was going to hitchhike from Colorado to Oregon, and just put my faith out there, right? And so that next, I stayed the night at this hotel, and then the next morning, that big bug. The next morning at sunrise, like, pack all my stuff, have it all neat and tidy. I walk down the road to the nearest like convenience store, and I buy some some drinks, some like Gatorade and stuff. And then I got a piece of cardboard, and then used a big sharp permanent pen, and all I wrote on it was West for home, and then did a cross, like a Christian cross next to it. And so that's what my plan was, just hold a sign. I got my giant backpack and then a rolling suitcase, and that's I have to it's probably like 70 pounds worth of shit, between the two. It's like 70 pounds worth of stuff that I had to tote along with me. But I had this cardboard sign, just West for home, that I was just gonna hold on the side of the road. So when I go in this convenience store, I ask the clerk if she has a piece of cardboard, like a scrap piece of cardboard. She gives me this big piece of cardboard, and so I go in the back corner, like they have some tables like for people to sit down and drink coffee or whatever. So I'm sitting at the table, writing on this cardboard, what I just said, West for home. And as I'm doing it, there's like 3 old timers sitting at a different table, and I could kind of see them like looking over, watching me. At some point, they ask me what I'm doing. I tell them. I'm pretty sure they were vets, like military vets. At least I think one of them was a Vietnam vet or a Korean War vet. I don't know. They're older. They're definitely older. I tell them what I'm doing, and then what about where I just come from, and they knew the person I was working from, and they told me that he's not a good person. I was good for getting out of there. Those guys ended up giving me a ride to the edge of town, and they just pretty much put me in a spot that is just like, if anybody's heading this direction, which is the direction I wanted to go, they'll see me. So they dropped me off on the edge of town, and then from that point forward, it's probably like 8 a.m., 8:30 a.m., 9 a.m., around there. From that point forward, I ended up catching my first ride. I sticking out my thumb, have my sign out. Some guy picked me up, and he gave me a ride all the way from Meeker, Colorado to somewhere on the edge of Wyoming. And then I ended up, long story short, I ended up getting all the way from Meeker, Colorado to Ogden, Utah by sunset, by evening. Caught multiple rides, and then some guy picked me up I got dropped off in Ogden, Utah. at some gas station, and I had to hike from the gas station to the entrance of the freeway that goes north to southbound. And so I stood right on the freeway entrance, the freeway, little small single lane freeway ramp, standing right there. And I got picked up by a guy that was just getting off work, and he lived on the outskirts of town, out in some suburbs. He ended up inviting me to stay. He asked me where I was going to sleep that night. I still had to go all the way through Utah and Eastern Oregon before I'd be back home. I still had a ways to go, and I wasn't going to be doing it at nighttime. He asked me where I was going to sleep. I told him I wasn't sure, probably just on the side of the highway or freeway somewhere. So he invited to let me sleep in his front yard, just set up my tent, and then he ended up feeding me dinner. He was a really nice person. He just, I guess his son travels a lot, and so that was the reason. Son travels a lot and does photography, and he saw my tripod when he was about to pass me, which is why he pulled over. He just thought of his son, which is why he picked me up. But he fed me dinner, and then the next morning, I slept in his front yard in my tent, and then the next morning he gave me a ride all the way back out to the freeway and set me up to a spot that somebody could pick me up if they wanted to. And then from that point forward, I spent the entire day catching a multitude of different rides. And I think I covered like 1,100 miles. I went all the way from northwest Colorado to central Oregon in a span of like 36 hours. Like, covered that entire distance. I caught like, I think like 15 or, it was around 15 or 16 different rides, hitchhiking from different people that picked me up. And I got all the way to Bend, Oregon, and then my mom came and picked me up from Bend, I believe, if I remember correctly. Yeah, picked me up from Bend. But I rolled into Bend. I live in Redmond. Bend is just 15 minutes north of Redmond, or south of Redmond. Sorry. So, rolled into Bend right at sunset. The 2 days after leaving Colorado, so it was like 36 hours. There's a whole bunch of like interesting stories from those hitchhiking experiences, but it's not really relevant to this. But that was one of the big thing, one of the things with Colorado. So this took a little while to tell. That's the first thing I did after Hawaii was. Told you about my family, my reasons for leaving Oregon again and going to Colorado. Just a little bit about Colorado. And then my reasons for leaving. There's other things that I can talk about, but I could talk about it later time. I'm just kind of blanking. Just trying to think about my transition of how I want to do these next videos. When I returned back from Colorado, hitchhiking back from Colorado, I knew my reasons why I left, because not only was I being taken advantage of, I was being paid like $2 an hour, which is below minimum wage, way below, and I was doing some of the hardest work I've ever done. So that's enough reason to leave. For some reason, even though I tried explaining it all to my folks when I got back home to Central Oregon, my dad was accusing me and had the idea in his brain that I had been fired from Colorado. Why? I don't know, but he literally thought that I returned back to Oregon because I got fired. But why? I don't know. And so he, again, treating me like shit. Like, every time I come back home to Oregon, I'm born and raised in Central Oregon, and so my whole family's in Central Oregon. So as I've been living my life, whether going to college, then coming home to Central Oregon to visit family, when I had a Costco job, I would return to Central Oregon to visit family. When I quit Costco and traveled, every time I go somewhere, I eventually come home, touch bases with my mom and see the family and stuff, and then eventually go off and go do something else again. That's kind of what I've been doing. But every time I come home, my dad's just treat me like shit. Why? I have no idea. So When I came back from Hawaii, we had those conversations. Treat me like I'm a crazy person because I told him what I learned and what I experienced in Hawaii. Okay. And then when I come back from Colorado, he's accusing me of being fired, so that's just giving him more reason to be agitated with me. No idea why, but it's just this thing, whatever he's got going on in his brain, whatever he's been connected to for a long time, as I've been trying to live my life, he's been getting angrier and angrier because I'm not going down a specific path that he has apparently been wanting me to go down. I've just been wanting to live my own life and refuse to do what he tells me to do. That's my interpretation of it anyways. Every time I came home, he's trying to tell me how I need to be living my life, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go do what I'm going to do, how I want to live my life. And so, with that said, like, when I came back home from Colorado, it was just as bad, if not worse, as far as my family dynamics. So with that said, I'm going to conclude this portion of the video, and the next episode is going to be about what happened after I returned home from Colorado, and that section will cover pretty much everything that needs to be talked about up until around the time I start planning to go to Las Vegas, which is when I do DMT. Okay, so this next video is going to cover what I was doing after returning from Colorado. The type of I ended up getting a winter seasonal job hanging Christmas lights. This was around the time that I got Milwaukee in my life, and around the time when I also got a new vehicle. You know, I got that job, and then I ended up getting a vehicle, and then I ended up trading that vehicle and got a travel van just like this one. And then I'll talk about going to Montana and all that, and then eventually that episode will end. And then we'll start talking about what happened in Las Vegas, and that's when things start getting really nuts. But yep, that's it for this video. You have a nice, wonderful day. If it's not awkward.